My name is Abigail Morgan. I am 33 years old. When I was 29, my sister in law, Courtney, viciously told the whole extended family that I was a nobody who had tricked her brother into marriage with my average looks and dead end job. Now, we are crammed in the hospital waiting room after my father in law's frightening episode, and she is starting in, once more loudly declaring to everyone that I brought nothing but embarrassment to the family name, and that my husband deserved far better. My hidden success, earning $42,000 monthly for the past 11 months, had shown me their true faces. I felt my resolve harden as I prepared to confront the betrayal head on, no matter how alone it left me. If you've ever been torn down by in laws who thought they were better, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your stories keep me going. Let me take you back to how everything unfolded in Knoxville, Tennessee, because this wasn't some sudden blow up. It had been building quietly for months, the kind of slow poison you don't notice until it has already reached your heart. I had been with my husband for 2 years when I made the decision to hide my real professional life from his family. I was a senior marketing strategist at a mid-sized digital agency downtown, the kind of role where I led campaigns that brought in major clients and boosted revenue in ways that made my bosses fight to keep me. But after a few early family gatherings where Courtney made snide comments about people who think they're too good for real life, I chose to let them believe I was still in a basic support position with a modest paycheck. I wanted to see who they really were when they thought I had nothing to offer. My grandmother had passed when I was 26 and left me a letter that stuck with me. True character shows when someone believes you can't help them. So I tested it, and my sister-in-law failed every single time. That night in the hospital waiting room, the air felt thick with worry and fluorescent lights. My father-in-law had clutched his chest at dinner earlier and collapsed right there in the dining room. We rushed him here, and now the whole family was clustered in those stiff plastic chairs while doctors ran tests. My husband sat beside me, gripping my hand, his face pale. My mother-in-law kept pacing in her designer sweater, muttering prayers under her breath. Then Courtney arrived, sweeping in late as usual, with her perfectly highlighted hair and that designer bag she loved to flash. She took one look at me and her lips curled. "Well, isn't this just perfect?" my sister-in-law said, loud enough for the nurse at the desk and two other waiting families to hear. "Here we are in crisis, and guess who shows up looking like she just came from another one of her little office meetings? Some of us actually put family first, Abigail." "You wouldn't know about that, would you?" My stomach twisted. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but kept my voice steady. "This isn't the time, Courtney." She laughed, that sharp, sarcastic sound that always cut deeper than any shout. "Oh, please. We all know you've been playing the devoted wife while hiding whatever it is you're really doing with your time. My brother deserves someone who actually supports him, not someone chasing some fantasy career that leaves everyone else picking up the slack." She turned to my mother-in-law and added even louder, "Don't you think it's suspicious how she never talks about work? Probably because it's nothing impressive." My father-in-law, still pale but conscious enough to follow from his gurney in the hallway, suddenly cleared his throat and changed the subject with forced energy. "Enough about that. Has anyone heard from the cardiologist yet? We need to focus on getting me out of here." It was his way of trying to steer things, but it didn't stop the sting. My husband squeezed my hand tighter, but said nothing. That silence hurt almost as much as her words. I sat there replaying the last 11 months in my head. I had landed the promotion that bumped my income to $42,000 a month after taxes, complete with stock bonuses and speaking slots at 2 regional industry conferences. I could have bought the whole family new cars if I wanted. Instead, I drove my same reliable sedan and let them assume I was scraping by. Why? Because Courtney's comments at every barbecue and holiday had already started turning the family against me in small ways, forgetting to invite me to planning lunches, rolling her eyes when I offered ideas for family trips, whispering to my husband that I seemed distant. I had overheard enough to know she was the one planting those seeds. This hospital moment was just the latest. The doctor finally came out with an update. My father-in-law would need monitoring overnight, but was stable. Relief washed over the room, but Courtney wasn't done. As we gathered coats to head to the parking lot, she pulled my husband aside, her voice carrying just enough for me to catch. You need to think about what kind of life you want, Nathan. She's always been more focused on herself. Remember what I told you last month about her priorities? My best friend Emily Parker had warned me about nights like this. She had seen Courtney in action at a few group outings and texted me later that evening after I filled her in. She's never going to stop unless you set a hard line. You deserve better than being the family scapegoat. Emily was the one person outside the family who knew my real income and the reason I was hiding it. She had become my quiet lifeline, the one I called when the doubts crept in. The next morning, I drove to the agency feeling drained but determined. My colleague, Derek Lawson, noticed right away when I stepped into our shared office space. "You look like you barely slept. Everything okay at home?" Derek had become another unexpected support. He was the guy who helped me run discreet background checks on vendor contracts and had once joked that my family sounded intense. I gave him the short version without names. He shook his head. "Sounds like classic undermining. If you ever need an outside perspective on how to handle it without blowing everything up, I'm here." I nodded but kept my plan to myself. I wasn't ready to reveal my success yet. Not when Courtney was still pushing so hard to isolate me. Over the next 2 weeks, the small violations kept coming, each one a fresh jab that built the tension like a ticking clock. My mother-in-law called one afternoon, asking me to help organize a surprise birthday lunch for my father-in-law. I agreed immediately, thinking it might smooth things over. Courtney found out and texted the family group chat, the one I was conveniently left out of until my husband forwarded it, saying, "Maybe we should keep it small. Not everyone needs to be involved in every family thing." My husband later told me she had added privately to him that I always make it about me. I felt the isolation growing. Family texts slowed. Invites to casual weekends at their lake cabin stopped, including me directly. My sister-in-law started posting old photos on social media of my husband with his ex, Kayla Morrison, captioning them with things like, "Some memories hit different," and tagging the whole family. It was subtle but effective. Even my uncle Philip Grant, who usually stayed neutral, mentioned in a call that Courtney had been concerned about our marriage lately. One evening, my husband came home from work looking troubled. He set his keys down and said, "Courtney pulled me aside again today. She thinks you're hiding something big. She says if you're not being honest with us, it could affect the whole family dynamic." I almost told him everything right then. The promotion, the income, the reason I had stayed quiet. But her words from the hospital still echoed. Instead, I asked him quietly if he believed her. He hesitated just long enough for my heart to drop. "I don't know anymore. No." That was the first real crack. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, the weight of 11 months of pretending pressing down. I had done it to test them, but the test was revealing truths I wasn't sure I could live with. The next day at work, Derek noticed my distraction again and offered to grab coffee. Over the break, he listened as I shared more details. "She's turning them against you one conversation at a time," he said. "Classic reputation game. You don't have to play it her way." I left that conversation with a plan forming, not confrontation yet, but careful observation. I started documenting the jabs, the exclusions the way Courtney always initiated the worst of it, with her sarcastic little comments that sounded innocent to outsiders, but sliced straight through me. I told myself I would wait for the right moment to reveal who I really was. But deep down, I wondered if any moment would ever feel safe. 2 weeks later, we were all at my in-laws' house for a low-key Sunday dinner to celebrate my father-in-law's clean bill of health from the hospital follow-up. The table was set simply nothing fancy, just the kind of middle-class spread of roasted chicken and sides that felt normal for Knoxville families. My mother-in-law had asked me to bring the salad, and I had spent extra time making it from scratch, hoping it might earn a kind word. Courtney arrived late as always, and the moment she saw the bowl, she smirked. "Nice try, with the healthy option," my sister-in-law said loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "Some of us actually cook real meals for the family instead of pretending to contribute while chasing office glory. It's almost like you think you're too important for this." She turned to my husband with a sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nathan, you deserve someone who puts this kind of effort in every day, not just when it looks good on paper." My father-in-law tried to deflect with a sudden topic shift. "Hey, did anyone catch the game last night? Those Vols are looking strong this season." But the damage was done. I felt my husband's hand pause on my knee under the table, uncertain. My mother-in-law just nodded along like it was normal conversation. I sat there biting my tongue the salad I had carefully prepared, now tasting like ash in my mouth. Later that evening, after we left, I pulled my husband aside in the driveway. "Do you hear how she talks to me?" I asked, voice low. He sighed and said Courtney was just protective of the family. "She's always been like that. Maybe if you opened up more about work, it would help." His words landed like another quiet betrayal. I drove home in silence, the resolve I had felt in the hospital hardening further. I knew then that the test had gone on long enough. The next time Courtney pushed, I would push back. But on my terms, even if it meant ending up standing alone, the drive home that night felt longer than usual. My hands tight on the steering wheel as my husband's silence filled the car like another weight. But the resolve from the hospital waiting room had crystallized into something sharper. I wasn't going to keep testing forever. The next push from my sister-in-law would be the one where I finally showed my hand, on my terms. The following week, the small violations kept coming, each one launched by my sister-in-law with that familiar, sarcastic edge that made my blood run hot. One afternoon, my mother-in-law called to ask if I could help pick up a few things for my father-in-law's upcoming checkup appointment. I said yes right away, figuring it was a chance to show I was there for the family. But before I could even hang up, my sister-in-law jumped on the line from her end of the call. "That's sweet of you to offer, Abigail. But let's be real. Some of us actually follow through on family commitments instead of treating them like optional side gigs. You know the kind of thing people do when they aren't too busy chasing whatever it is you chase all day." Her words landed like a slap delivered first and loudest, steering the entire conversation into familiar territory. My mother-in-law stayed quiet, my father-in-law listening in the background, let out a forced, awkward laugh that quickly turned into him abruptly excusing himself from the room with a mumbled excuse about needing fresh air. It was his way of dodging, but it left the sting hanging in the air untouched. I ended the call with my jaw clenched, the phone still warm in my hand. My best friend Emily Parker texted me minutes later after I vented the details. She had become my steady outside voice. Through all of this, the one who reminded me I wasn't imagining the pattern. "She's doing it again, isn't she? Starting every jab herself so no one else has to. You holding up?" I replied that I was. But inside, I felt the isolation creeping closer. My husband came home that evening and mentioned the call, casually repeating my sister-in-law's line, almost word for word. When I asked if he had pushed back, he just shrugged and said she was worried about family unity. Another small cut, another step toward the edge. 2 days later, my colleague Derek Lawson pulled me aside during our afternoon team huddle at the agency. He had overheard me on a quick personal call earlier and read the frustration on my face. Derek had turned into an unexpected sounding board, the kind of coworker who offered quiet advice without prying too deep. "If it's the in-law stuff again, you don't have to carry it alone," he said low enough that no one else heard. "I've seen people get ground down by that kind of slow reputation game. Want me to help you run a discreet check on any public posts she's making? No pressure." I thanked him, but told him I was still figuring out my next move. His offer planted a small seed of strategy in my mind, but I wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet. The test still felt unfinished, even as my sister-in-law's words chipped away at everything I had built in secret. The real escalation hit the following weekend when the family gathered for a casual backyard get-together at my in-laws' place to celebrate my father-in-law's improved test results. It was nothing fancy, just folding chairs and store-bought snacks under the late afternoon sun, the kind of low-key afternoon Knoxville families do without much planning. My cousin Lisa had driven up from a neighboring town for the day. She was the newest addition to these gatherings, a distant relative who had started showing up more since my father-in-law's health scare. She seemed nice enough at first, chatting with everyone and asking about my work in a genuine way. But my sister-in-law spotted an opening the moment I mentioned a recent project deadline I had crushed at the agency. "Oh, how adorable," my sister-in-law cut in first her voice, carrying across the group before anyone else could respond. She set her drink down with deliberate care and turned straight toward me, eyes narrowing. talking about deadlines like you're running some big important show while the rest of us are here actually showing up for family. Tell me, Abigail, does your husband even know what you do all day? Or is that another secret you're keeping so you can play the humble card? The jab was pure venom wrapped in sweetness, and she delivered it loud enough for my cousin Lisa, my mother in law, and two neighbors who had wandered over to hear. My husband shifted beside me, but stayed silent. My father in law tried to laugh it off awkwardly again, before suddenly standing up and walking inside without another word, his shoulders tense in a way that said he was done refereeing. My cousin Lisa looked uncomfortable, but didn't interrupt. The moment stretched heavy in public, and I felt every eye on me like a spotlight I hadn't asked for. I kept my face neutral, but inside, the anger was building like a storm I could no longer ignore. My sister-in-law wasn't done. She leaned in closer, her next words quieter, but still sharp enough to cut. Some people marry into a family and then act like they're above it. Just saying. That was the pattern. She always started it, always steered it, always made sure the first blow landed squarely on my reputation. The rest of the afternoon dragged in awkward fragments of small talk, but the damage was spreading. Later that evening, my husband drove us home in silence again, and when I asked him point blank why he never defended me, he said my sister-in-law had been texting him privately about how I seemed distant lately, and that maybe I needed to be more open. The words landed like another quiet betrayal, and I realized the isolation was no longer creeping. It was here. I called Emily the next morning from my office before the workday started. She listened without interrupting, then said the thing I had been avoiding. Abigail, this isn't testing anymore. This is them rewriting who you are in front of everyone. If you don't set a boundary soon, you're going to lose pieces of yourself you can't get back. Derek stopped by my desk an hour later with coffee and a concerned look. He had caught wind of the weekend through a mutual friend who knew my cousin Lisa and offered again to help document anything public my sister-in-law was posting. I almost took him up on it right then. The temptation to reveal my real income, the $42,000 a month I had been quietly banking for the past 11 months, was growing stronger. But I held back. One more violation, I told myself, just enough to be sure. That one more came 3 days later in the form of a family group text thread I was still included on barely. My sister-in-law started it as always. She posted a throwback photo of my husband from years ago with his ex, Kayla Morrison, captioning it with, "Some bonds just make more sense for the long haul, don't they?" Then she tagged everyone, including me, and added a follow-up message aimed straight at the heart of things. Certain people in this family could learn a thing or two about loyalty instead of treating marriage like a part-time hobby. My phone buzzed with replies from my mother-in-law agreeing it was food for thought, and my cousin Lisa adding a neutral emoji that still felt like siding. My husband read it over my shoulder and sighed, but didn't type anything in response. The message sat there, public and permanent, chipping away at the last bit of goodwill I had left. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, the weight of 11 months of pretending pressing down harder than ever. My sister-in-law had turned the entire family into an echo chamber of doubt about me, and she had done it one calculated first strike at a time. I set the phone down and made a decision in that moment. The next family event, whenever it came, would be when I stopped hiding. Not for revenge, but for the truth. Even if it left me standing completely alone at the end. But then my phone buzzed again, with a private message from an unknown number. The preview line made my stomach drop. "You think you're so clever, hiding everything we all know, what you're really up to now." The message sat on my screen, like a live wire, the unknown number glowing under the office lights as I stared at it during my lunch break. My hands shook just enough to make typing difficult, but I opened it anyway. It was from a blocked contact that I knew in my gut had to be connected to my sister-in-law. The words were too precise, too cutting to be random. "You think you're so clever hiding everything we all know, what you're really up to now. Nathan deserves the truth before this goes any further." My stomach dropped. She had always been the one to start these things, and now it felt like she was escalating beyond the family group chats and backyard comments reaching into my private space with anonymous threats that left no fingerprints but plenty of fear. I deleted the message immediately and blocked the number, but the damage was already spreading through my thoughts like cracks in ice. That afternoon at the agency, I barely focused on the campaign strategy meeting, my mind replaying every recent jab my sister-in-law had launched first and loudest. Derek Lawson noticed my distraction when he stopped by my desk with the usual afternoon coffee run. He had become more than just a colleague over these months, the kind of steady presence who listened without pushing for details he didn't need. "Everything all right?" he asked quietly, keeping his voice low so the rest of the team wouldn't overhear. I gave him the bare minimum about the text, and his jaw tightened. "Sounds like someone's trying to rattle you on purpose. If it happens again, we can trace it discreetly through the agency's security contacts. No one should have to deal with that kind of underhanded stuff alone." His offer felt like a small anchor in the storm, but I still wasn't ready to pull him fully into the mess. That evening, my husband came home from his shift, looking exhausted, the kind of tired that went beyond work. He dropped his keys on the counter and mentioned casually that my sister-in-law had called him earlier. Of course, she had started the conversation herself. "She said she's worried about us," he told me, while stirring pasta on the stove. "Keep saying you're pulling away and that maybe there's something bigger going on with your job that you're not sharing. She thinks it could affect how the family sees our marriage." I felt the familiar twist in my chest, the one that came every time my sister-in-law planted those seeds first and let them grow unchecked. My mother-in-law had apparently chimed in during the same call, agreeing that openness is important for family unity. But it was always my sister-in-law who lit the match. My husband didn't defend me. He just asked if there was anything I wanted to tell him, his eyes avoiding mine for a second too long. I almost broke right then and revealed the truth. The senior marketing strategist role that had quietly turned into $42,000 a month after my promotion 11 months ago. The client wins that had my name circulating in industry circles, the financial cushion that meant I could have covered any family emergency without blinking. But the anonymous text still burned in my mind, and I held back. Instead, I said I was just tired from work, and we ate dinner in a silence that felt heavier than usual. Later that night, I confided in my best friend Emily Parker over a quick video call from my car in the driveway. She had been my rock through every escalation, the one person who knew the full picture of my hidden success and why I had started the test in the first place. "She's isolating you piece by piece, Abigail," Emily said, her face serious on the screen. "Starting every single attack herself, so it looks like concern. You need to decide when enough is enough before it swallows you whole." Her words echoed in my head, long after we hung up, fueling the quiet determination that had been building since the hospital. The next few days brought more of the same slow pressure, each incident kicked off by my sister-in-law, in ways that made denial impossible. My cousin Lisa texted the family about a casual coffee meetup she was organizing to keep spirits up after my father-in-law's health scare, and my sister-in-law replied first in the group thread, "Love the idea, but let's make sure it's for people who actually prioritize family time over whatever side hustles keep them distracted." She tagged me specifically, turning a simple invitation into another public dig at my character. My mother-in-law liked the message without comment. My father-in-law responded with a neutral thumbs-up emoji, but I knew from past patterns he would later steer conversations away from any real confrontation, excusing himself with some sudden errand if things got tense. My husband forwarded the thread to me privately with a short note, "Maybe we should talk about this later." The isolation was no longer subtle. It felt orchestrated, and my sister-in-law was always the conductor. I threw myself into work to cope nailing a major client presentation that earned me another quiet bonus and praise from the agency leads. Derek pulled me aside afterward in the break room, his expression thoughtful. "You're killing it here, Abigail. Whatever's happening at home, don't let it dim that. If you ever want to loop in someone neutral for advice on handling family reputation stuff, I've got contacts who specialize in mediation without the drama." His support felt genuine, a counterweight to the constant undermining, and for the first time, I considered showing him the growing folder of screenshots and notes I had been keeping. Every jab my sister-in-law had initiated. Every exclusion, every text that chipped away at my place in the family. but I held off. The test had to run its course naturally, even as the emotional toll mounted. Then came the family dinner, 2 nights later at my in-laws' house, the one my mother-in-law had planned as a low-key celebration of my father-in-law's full recovery. The table was simple with store-bought sides, and the roasted chicken my mother-in-law always made nothing flashy but familiar in that Knoxville way. I had brought a dessert I spent extra time on, hoping it might earn a neutral comment at least. My sister-in-law arrived last as usual, and the moment she spotted the dish, she pounced first, her voice carrying across the room before anyone else could speak. "Oh, look, Abigail's playing domestic again. How sweet. Some of us do this every week without turning it into a performance for attention, you know?" She turned to my husband with that same saccharine smile. "Nathan, you really should think about what kind of partner builds a life with the family instead of around her own schedule." My father-in-law cleared his throat and changed the subject abruptly to the latest local sports news, his chair scraping back as he stood to refill drinks and escape the tension he refused to address directly. My cousin Lisa shifted uncomfortably in her seat but stayed silent. My mother-in-law just nodded along as if my sister-in-law's words were reasonable dinner conversation. The rest of the meal dragged with forced small talk, but the undercurrent was unmistakable. My sister-in-law kept steering every topic back to subtle criticisms of me, always starting the sentence herself with that sarcastic lilt that made outsiders think she was just being protective. By the time dessert came around, I had barely touched my food, the anger and hurt blending into a quiet resolve that felt unbreakable. My husband walked me to the car afterward, his hand on my back, but his words careful. "She's just stressed about Dad's health still. Maybe if you shared more about work, it would ease things." Another deflection, another quiet alignment with her narrative. I drove home alone that night, after dropping him at a late work errand, the anonymous text from days earlier replaying in my mind alongside every initiation she had launched. The following morning, I woke to another message, this time from my sister-in-law, directly in a private thread she had never used before. "We need to talk about the secrets, Abigail. Nathan is starting to see things my way, and it's only going to get worse if you keep hiding." It was the clearest escalation yet, her words dripping with the same contempt she had always delivered first in every group setting. I stared at it for a long minute, my heart pounding with the realization that the test was reaching its breaking point. Emily called me right after I forwarded it to her, her voice urgent. "This is her trying to force your hand. Don't react yet, but you can't keep pretending forever." Derek texted shortly after sensing something off from my earlier mood at work, offering to meet for a quick strategy coffee if I needed it. I spent the rest of the day at the agency going through the motions, but inside I was mapping out the next family gathering, a casual weekend barbecue my mother-in-law had mentioned in passing. That would be the moment, I decided, not for revenge, but for truth. Even if revealing my real success and walking away meant ending up completely isolated with no family dinners or group texts or Sunday afternoons left. The thought terrified me, but the alternative, letting my sister-in-law keep initiating the slow destruction of my place in their world, terrified me more. Then, as I was packing up to leave the office, my phone buzzed with a new group invitation from my mother-in-law for that exact barbecue. My sister-in-law had already replied first, "Can't wait. Hope everyone comes as their real selves this time." The words hung there like a challenge, and I knew the clock was ticking down. To the confrontation I could no longer delay. The weekend arrived, and I pulled into my in-laws' driveway. For the barbecue, with my stomach in knots, but my mind clearer than it had been in months. The gathering was the usual low-key Knoxville affair, neighbors drifting in and out, the grill going, and everyone balancing paper plates on their laps while kids ran around the yard. I had decided on the drive over that this would be the day I stopped pretending. No more testing, no more waiting for one more jab. My sister-in-law had pushed too far with that anonymous text and the private message, and I was done letting her steer every conversation into doubt about me. My sister-in-law spotted me the moment I stepped out of the car, carrying the side dish I had brought. She set her drink down with a deliberate clink and raised her voice so the whole group could hear before anyone else even said hello. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence as her real self this time." Or are we still playing the humble card, Abigail? Some of us have been wondering how long you're going to keep hiding, whatever it is that makes you think you're too good for simple family time like this. Her words cut straight through the casual chatter, laced with that familiar sarcastic sweetness she always used to start these things. She turned straight to my husband standing beside me and added even louder, Nathan, you deserve someone who doesn't treat marriage like an optional add-on to her secret life. We've all seen how distant she's been. My best friend Emily Parker had texted me encouragement right before I left the house, reminding me I didn't have to carry this alone. But in that moment, I felt very alone. My colleague Derek Lawson had offered to be a sounding board if things blew up, but he wasn't here. My cousin Lisa was chatting with a neighbor a few feet away and looked over with wide eyes when my sister-in-law spoke, but she stayed quiet. My mother-in-law just nodded along, like it was normal small talk, stirring her iced tea without a word. What happened next was the part that shocked me the most. My father-in-law, who had spent every previous gathering trying to smooth things over or change the subject, suddenly stood up from his lawn chair. His face went hard jaw, clenched tight in a way I had never seen, and he looked straight at me with an anger that seemed to have been building in private for a long time. You know what Courtney is, right? He said, his voice rising in a sharp, defensive burst that made everyone freeze. I've been listening to her concerns for months now, and I've had enough of watching you make my son question everything. If you can't be straight with this family about who you really are or what you're really doing, then maybe it's time you gave Nathan some space to figure out what he really needs. We don't need more secrets around here. The words landed like a thunderclap. It was the most direct, shocking support I had ever heard him give my sister-in-law. And it left the whole group stunned into silence. No awkward laugh, no quick exit, no topic change. Just raw frustration, aimed straight at me, revealing he had been part of the private conversations all along. My husband looked between us, face pale, but said nothing. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my voice steady and calm, the way I had practiced in my head 100 times. You're right about one thing, I said, looking first at my sister-in-law, then at my father-in-law, then at the whole circle. I have been hiding something, not because I'm ashamed, but because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer. 11 months ago, I got promoted to senior marketing strategist at the agency. I now earn $42,000 a month after taxes plus bonuses and stock options. I could have helped with any family need, any medical bill, any trip. But I stayed quiet because my sister-in-law has made it her mission to start every single conversation about me with doubt and sarcasm. She's the one who sends the anonymous texts, the private messages, the throwback photos meant to make me look disloyal. And the rest of you have let her do it because it was easier than standing up. My sister-in-law's face went red, but she recovered fast and tried to jump in again. That's convenient timing, isn't it? Suddenly you're rich and important after we all called you out. I shook my head and kept going, the words coming easier now. This wasn't about money, it was about character. My grandmother taught me that people show who they are when they think you can't help them. And you showed me. Every time. I'm done hiding, and I'm done letting this family rewrite who I am. I love my husband, but I won't stay in a place where I'm constantly torn down, first by my sister-in-law, and then backed up by everyone else. I'm setting a boundary here. I'm stepping back completely. No more dinners, no more group chats, no more pretending everything is fine. If Nathan wants to talk, he knows where to find me. But I'm choosing my peace. My husband reached for my hand, but stopped halfway, his eyes conflicted. Abigail, wait. My mother-in-law started to speak, but my sister-in-law cut her off with another sharp comment about how I was running away again. My father-in-law crossed his arms and nodded firmly, doubling down on his earlier outburst. Maybe that's for the best, he said, the words hanging heavy in the warm afternoon air. My cousin Lisa looked down at her plate, uncomfortable but silent. No one stepped forward. No one argued against my sister-in-law's lead. The group simply parted as I turned and walked back to my car, the sound of my own footsteps, the only thing breaking the sudden quiet. I drove home in a fog, the radio off, the city lights of Knoxville blurring past. When I pulled into my apartment complex, I sat in the car for a long time, waiting for the tears or the anger or something to hit. Instead, I just felt a strange, heavy calm. My phone buzzed once, with a message from my husband saying we needed to talk, then went quiet. No follow-up, no defense. Emily texted later, asking how it went, and I told her the truth. I had set the boundary and walked away. Derek sent a short note saying he was proud of me and that the door at work was always open if I needed to vent. But the family group chat I had been in for 2 years went completely silent after that. No one reached out, no apologies, no questions about my real job or income. Just emptiness where the Sunday dinners and holiday plans used to be. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. I threw myself into work landing another big client campaign that earned me praise from the agency leads and a quiet raise. My colleague Derek checked in regularly, becoming more of a friend than just a coworker, and Emily made sure I wasn't spending every evening alone. But the family piece stayed gone. My husband came by once to talk, sitting on my couch with the same conflicted look, but when I asked if he had ever pushed back against his sister or his father, he admitted he hadn't. "They're family," he said softly. "It's complicated." I told him I understood, then asked him to leave. He did. There were no dramatic fights, no public exposures, no revenge that made headlines or fixed anything. Just the slow, lonely reality of choosing myself and watching the door close behind me. I still earn $42,000 a month. I still drive the same reliable car and live in the same modest apartment. But now I do it without the constant weight of wondering when the next sarcastic comment would land or who would start it. The isolation is real. Some nights I sit by the window with a cup of tea and miss the idea of what family could have been. Other nights I feel lighter, freer, like I finally stepped out of a role I never asked to play. My grandmother's letter still sits in my nightstand, and I read it sometimes when the quiet gets loud. She was right about character showing when people think you have nothing to offer. What she didn't mention was how much it can hurt when they prove her point and how much strength it takes to walk away anyway. Thank you for listening to my story. It still hurts to tell, but saying it out loud makes the loneliness feel a little less heavy. If you've ever had to set a hard boundary with in-laws or family and ended up standing alone because of it, drop a comment and let me know I'm not the only one. Your stories remind me that choosing peace is never the wrong decision, even when it leaves you on your own.